into the role of advocates in lung cancer research and even the idea of advocates that focus on research, period.
So I just kind of wanted to take a step back, and I know that sometimes, not certainly in this room, but when we go out and we talk about being advocates, some people have a fairly narrow view of what advocates are. So I wanted to take a step back and kind of define that there are multiple roles for advocates. So advocates can be involved in fundraising, obviously. They can be involved in support, where they maybe help patients or caregivers, whether they're navigating the medical system or insurance or what have you. They can be involved in outreach and education, so doing public awareness, doing prevention, all of the things we just talked about in terms of smoking cessation prevention that I would consider outreach and education. Policy, which is I think what most people sort of tend to think about when they think about advocacy, but that's only one chunk of it. So working with policy makers, it sounds like in India we maybe need some serious policy advocacy surrounding government intervention and making some resources available for smoking cessation and prevention programs, and allowing a little more graphicness to the packaging. But what we really want to concentrate on here, particularly because IASLC is a research organization, is the role of the research advocate. So I know a lot of my colleagues from the Global Lung Cancer Coalition are here, and they let me know that the U.S. is not alone in having opportunities for advocates to be involved in research. So we have advocate opportunities at institutions, at community initiatives, health resource allocation, specific trials and studies, and at national agencies. These are all places where advocates are involved across the world. Now, certainly every country may not have opportunities, but many do. Even the pharmaceutical industry engages advocates to review trial designs and consent forms and provide feedback. So what I wanted to put out to you, and I'm really, really asking you to come to the microphone, what attributes do you think that a research advocate needs to be successful?
I would say that probably the most important thing that I think of is the training that's provided, because I know especially the patients that you have on your panel that help decide. I remember we helped you find one, and luckily we had somebody that had some experience with that, and I believe that you also provide training to the advocate. So I'd actually be interested in hearing a little bit more about how you do that and what that's like.
I certainly am happy to share the training that we have, but I'd also love to hear what other folks have to say about what training is available. So as Maureen said, we fund research ourselves, our organization, the National Lung Cancer Partnership, and we include a patient advocate reviewer on every grant review. So we have 3 scientists and then a patient advocate on every grant. And we select advocates, from people who have been recommended to us from other organizations, and we're very thankful for that. Thank you, Maureen. As well as people who have gone through what we have is called an advocacy summit. And there we bring together people to expose them to all those different kinds of advocacy that I mentioned earlier. And then they put down an action plan what they want to do. And so some people say, hey, I want to get involved in doing research advocacy. And so then we take that group of people and then we train them further. And we do an online webinar with them. And I'll toot my own horn a little bit. I had a wonderful comment from somebody who had been through our review after having done review for the Department of Defense Lung Cancer Research Program, where she told me that they had no training and that she wished that they had a training like ours because it had helped her so much in getting ready for the review. So certainly we're happy to share these best practices with folks, but I'd love to hear from others what you guys are doing, particularly in other countries.
My perspective is a little different because I think I come not from the same direction a lot of folks come from. I would say that what a research advocate from the patient perspective, needs to be persistent, needs to understand the drug development process, which is very complicated to learn, so that you can actually understand, not necessarily speak the same language, but understand the language of the scientist, whether you're in industry or pharma. But above all, you have to be relentless and just not let it get you down, because it is a complex process. By definition, everybody in this room wants things done tomorrow. So do the scientists, quite honestly. But the reality is it's a complex process. So if I was going to come up with one word, it's just don't let it get you down, and be persistent, and be demanding. Don't let scientists say that, well, it's going to take so long. You have to push the envelope and not let status quo continue, and the focus on incremental improvements is a natural scientific process, and several scientists in the room and understand that we, of course, want things done tomorrow or today, and so just don't let it get it down.
One more point I would like to add to this discussion is making resource available. Because in developing countries, the situation might be different to the developed world, but in developing countries, Asian countries, getting funding or getting resources for advocacy is a fancy. It is a least priority, because most of the pharmaceuticals, they also straightway go for the clinical research. If you're conducting trial of a product, we are ready to sponsor everything. But as far as advocacy is concerned, resources are not available easily. And the second thing is regarding the approach. You asked for suggestions. I think the modification of approach is required. Suppose we are conducting some advocacy program in Asian countries, then the approach has to be different, and it cannot be randomly same for all the countries. Like, depending upon the cultural and socio-economic environment, the approach has to be different.
In addition to funding, what are the kinds of resources? Can we be more specific amongst all of you who would have a specific need? What are those resources that you are most lacking and that you would need help in?
Resources right from designing a project, like to conduct, now suppose we are conducting two projects in rural areas. Now to get volunteers from schools, we have to motivate them like for some sort of encouragement. Now to conduct the process for last 6 months, we approached so many companies, so many corporate houses in our area, but they said this is not on our priority. So I think resources from international agencies, or there can be a corpus made by multinational organizations which can be distributed accordingly depending upon the criteria of selection. Because funding for even conducting a project, funding for advocacy regarding in particular community, this type of funding doesn't come directly. I know it is going to be very difficult to streamline the process, but I think we should work on it.
Are there opportunities for you to be an advocate with the corporations? So, I mentioned that some of the corporate entities are including advocates on trial design, on consent language. Do you have an opportunity to say, for example, you know what, I'll be an investigator on your trial, but not until you have some advocates involved? Is that something that you can do?
In terms of an attributes for an advocate in the research world, don't be intimidated. No question is dumb. And trust me, a lot of the researchers there also don't understand what's being said. So it's really easy to feel intimidated because you don't understand the wording or the jargon or what you think they're talking about. And it is really technical. But don't be afraid to ask a dumb question. I'll never forget the first meeting I attended that involved researchers in lung cancer. And they kept talking about apoptosis. And I finally leaned over to someone, I said, what does apoptosis mean? And they said, cell death. And I said, why don't they just say cell death? But the point is, don't be intimidated. And my experience is the researchers really value our input. And something that seems like a really basic question, or maybe even a stupid question that we want to ask, is oftentimes something they haven't even thought of. And so the researchers really value our perspective, the advocate's perspective in these meetings. They get so caught up in the science of it that they forget that there's real people they're talking about. And that's what we bring as advocates, is we bring the human side, that you can talk numbers and science, but it's the human component, and each individual patient is unique, and they can't lose sight of that.
I get to work with advocates across all disease types. Tell me, what do you think distinguishes lung cancer advocates? What sets you apart? Because I feel that there's something special, but I maybe will ask you to define it a bit.
I hadn't thought about it, but I would say we're probably very tenacious. I think we have to be. It's interesting because on one hand, we're a very small group, and that's good news, bad news, as you all know. You know, the bad news is we're small in relation to the impact of the disease on public health. The good news is we're small, and it gives us an opportunity to get to know each other better. And I think we can feel a little more bonded. I know in some of the early research meetings I used to attend, a lot of the other cancer advocate groups would make comments about, well, the lung cancer advocates are always this little clique walking around together. And I'm like, yeah, and the problem is? I mean, I think that's a good thing. So I think part of it is we need to lean on each other, we need to talk with each other, and we need to be tenacious.
What is it like being an advocate for a disease type where, and it's been inspirational on a clinical level to see the kinds of advancements, the identification of these pathways, understanding, I mean, the essence of personalized medicine, we understand its impact in breast cancer, but lung cancer, and the speed at which we're looking at these new pathways, really exciting. What does that feel like to be an advocate in the midst of watching the transformation of research on behalf of your idea, and how empowering is that for you in your mission and agenda?
Yeah, so I've been doing lung cancer advocacy for almost 10 years now, and this is the first time in the last couple of years that I can say that I feel there's some hope. I mean, real tangible hope, and not just measured in survivability by a couple of months. I mean, that's nice, but I mean significant survivability. So I'm excited. I think we all feel as we talk that we're on the cusp, we're on the brink of maybe having some really important, impactful breakthroughs in lung cancer research. And as a result, again, bring it back down to the people, the humans. I personally, as I know you all do in this room, know people who have been at stage 4 lung cancer and are now no evidence of disease. I mean, that was unheard of 10 years ago. So to watch that happen, and again, it's not enough yet, not enough, but just to start getting those success stories is very exciting, and I think it motivates all of us that much more.
I was going to add just that I think that we're also going to see a big change in the lung cancer advocacy movement as CT screening goes forward, because we're going to have more survivors. We're going to have early stage survivors, just like breast cancer has had, which means our survivor ranks are going to swell, and that advocacy movement is going to be brought up by all of that. So I think that we all need to be able to capitalize on that and really energize those survivors who come to the fore who, you know, they would have never known that they had the disease before. So we're going to be all benefiting from that in that regard, as well as the lives saved, of course.
One of the problems that we face is that our advocates fall into the 85% group that Liz referred to earlier. We had one great idea which was started, I don't know whether anybody's seen the movie Crocodile Dundee, but Paul Hogan's sister-in-law, Roz, started up an initiative called Lunch for Lung Cancer, and this became quite widespread around Australia. Of course, there wasn't huge dollars available, not the sort of things that the farmers have, but what we struck upon was having PhD top-ups for scientists, let's say over 3 years, and those and the investigators then come to the patient groups and share with them as the research proceeds, and that word gets out, and people can see that something is happening, and that's been a very positive development for us. But sadly, the advocates do pass. Liz Simon was another one. She was a fantastic advocate and used to come to meetings like this and really get up the doctor's ribs with all the various, you know, alternative therapies, etc., and cause quite a lot of discussion. But that's been a great idea for us. Thank you.
One of the things that we do also is we bring the researchers to our donors, not just to the patients, but to the people who are funding us. and we find that it's very inspirational to them and makes them feel that they are doing something good. I think coming from the fundraising world, I know how important it is that people really identify with what they're doing and feel that their dollars are going somewhere. So we're going to try to expand on this, and once a year bring all of our grantees together with our donors around our gala and share information, and hopefully have them go out and spread the word to their friends and swell the ranks of donors.
I think one of our primary responsibilities as advocacy organizations is to arm the patient with information and to arm their families with information in language that they can understand. At LUNGevity, we have something called Ask the Expert, where people can ask questions directly of medical professionals that's then answered in layman's terms. We offer webinars and seminars as well to translate complex medical terms for them. I know, Kim, you guys have done a fantastic piece on personalized medicine and what that means. Regina and the partnership does great work as well, just to help translate things to people so that they can understand. They can understand what clinical trials are, how they can become part of them, what this very complex medical research that's going on here, what it means directly for them. And does it mean anything for them right now, or is it something that could help them in the future? And also, as part of advocacy as well, what does it mean to be engaged? How can they be engaged? What does the information mean, and how can they take that information back into their communities to spread the word and to build the hope and to build the movement that goes with that?
Do you believe that there is benefit in trying to unify, continents? And, you've got a U.S. movement, you've got an emerging movement in your region of the world.
I think to some element, absolutely. I mean, look at Como. It's taken them 35 years, but they're now doing, they're a global organization. I think, though, at the forefront and where we are in the lung cancer movement, we need to be very cognizant of cultural differences, of different healthcare systems, the way that's reimbursed, of different donor bases. Some countries are much more philanthropic than others in terms of the need of the individual to become involved with advocacy. So I think that would be difficult to do on a global basis, but the message that lung cancer needs to be paid attention to and that additional emphasis and resources need to go into lung cancer research absolutely should be a global message.
Yeah, and it was really the research area I was going to. For instance, in my almost now too many times to count that I've had cancer, never once have my clinical choices not been made in combination with European data, ever. And in fact, European data more than once has influenced or become what my standard of care needed to be. And so I ask that because research doesn't take place in a vacuum. Research is a global process. If it's a global process, then I guess my question is, how does the advocate community come together to ensure clinical trials access, the exchange of information? I needed to know. I had to work really, really hard to find the data I needed based on European research for my rare clinical situation. So I'm just wondering how that translates in lung cancer and what we can do in our efforts to help facilitate this dialogue on a global level for the research agenda.
I think that there's great research going on in Europe. There's great research going on in Asia and in Israel as well. FAMRI has a fantastic institute in Israel doing really remarkable research. And I think it's all of our responsibilities to share that information with others. It becomes a difficult point of access in terms of not everybody in the U.S. can afford to go to Europe or to Asia to become part of one of those clinical trials. They probably don't even fit the protocols for that. But I think certainly to share the information and to attend sessions like this where we can understand what's going on a global basis is hugely important.
The other aspect of this is on the research side, as you touched on, Selma. Research is an international endeavor. One of the things that, we're a consortium, we have international members, we will be doing international clinical trials and projects. But in the meantime, the biggest obstacle to advancement to me is the lack of communication and coordination at the scientific level. And that's where patient advocacy groups can demand some collaboration, so that properly designed clinical trials that are designed from the front not to fail, to force the investigators, and they want to do this, by the way, we just have to make it easier for them to do so, enrich populations for clinical trials, have more intelligent design, And on a regulatory front, whether it's EMA or FDA, encourage the environment where you can have combination clinical trials without untoward risk to a drug company's registration pathway as a single agent. I mean, there are a million things we can do. The biggest common denominator there is make them communicate. They want to. They really do. There are no bad people involved in this process. Everybody has day jobs and they have their own labs to feed and their own unique political, financial sense. I would say if all of you could just make the scientists or encourage them or make it easier for them to collaborate, they will do so. And again, that's the modus operandi for our consortium.
Just to refer to clinical trials, I would like to share with you the experience we have in Italy. Normally people, when they come to us to ask, most of them, they don't have any idea of what a clinical trial is. The doctor proposed them to be enrolled in a clinical trial. They think to be a sort of guinea pig, yeah? And they don't understand really the value maybe of that. So you have to explain him that maybe that treatment that the doctor is giving to you, is providing for you, is the best treatment that at the moment you can have. So you should try to involve the family also and try to let him understand about it. And then we also have in Italy, for example, a national website where patients can have a sort of information about it, about clinical trial open in Italy, in any structure, in any point of reference in Italy. But the problem is that sometimes it's not really updated, so there are clinical trials already closed to the enrollment, to the recruitment, and it's not updated. So also this one is a very, how do you say, is a, you spend a lot of time in looking for news that are not true and that you have to be true about. So we tried as an association to help patients in this meaning. We designed a website, a database with all the clinical trials open in our country. We started at least with that one. The idea would be to have an European data collected, but actually at the moment it's quite difficult, but maybe we will find something with the Global Lung Cancer Coalition. We are working for that. Anyway, we try to design this kind of a database for patients just to help them to look for something they are really looking for and to have some point of reference. There is the name of the doctor, there is the name of the instructor, there is a telephone number, a mail. They can contact people and to have maybe the right answer of this question. So this is our experience there.